All right, boys and girls, to start our Wonder-inspired self-portrait, self-portraits are a picture of you, I'm going to be following along with this worksheet. And first I want to identify the shape of my face. You can look in a mirror, but you kind of want to decide if you have kind of a curved, rounded, or angular face. My face is a little bit angular, so on my paper, I'm lightly sketching. Right now, I'm even sketching darker than I want you to sketch because this kind of paper is called watercolor paper, and you'll notice it's pretty thick. Now I'm adding ears. I have a few different ear options for you. You can add more detail to your ears if you like. Again, you have a mirror. You're welcome to check it out. So this paper is more thick than typical paper that we use. So when you're using your pencil, you're actually creating an indent and you don't want that. So as light as possible. Okay, now I'm gonna look through these worksheets and find some hair that looks like my hair. My hair has bangs like this, and I don't need to totally copy one hairstyle. So for example, I have bangs like this, but I don't want a ponytail. So I'm gonna combine like these two types of hair. I'm making the outline of my bangs. I can add little lines for texture inside, but I'm not going to worry too much because I am going to shade all of my hair in anyways. All right, so now I'm going to the top. I'm going to make a little tiny indent at the top for where my part is and then make the length of my hair. So just sketching in. Now I'm going to turn the page on this worksheet and I'm going to look for the how to draw an eye page. In the cover of the book Wonder, at least one eye is shown, and I would like you to create at least one eye on your portrait. I'm not worried too much about scale. Scale and proportion is stuff that we were really talking about a lot during our gesture drawing lesson. And when we use scale and proportion, things tend to look more realistic. The goal of this painting is not to be realistic, so it's okay that my eye is a little big. So I did steps 1, 2, and 3. Now I'm moving to step 4, which is to create a curved line along the side on one end, and then a curved line on the other. So following along with the worksheet. Then I'm going to make the pupil, that's the black part of the eye, and I kind of like to put like a little glare like the light is hitting it. That's step 6. Step 7 is to add little lines. You'll notice the irises, the color part of your eyes, are not a solid color. Generally, they have little lines and specks of color. Optionally, that means you don't have to, but you can put eyelashes on. If you would like to add something else, like nose or a mouth, you're welcome to. But our goal today is really to have one realistic looking eye, although the scale might not be super realistic. Okay, now I'm gonna pause on this and I'm gonna do a practice watercolor technique. We'll be using watercolor in this lesson, but before we do, I want you to practice a few watercolor techniques. The first technique is something called wet on wet. When you do wet on wet, you take just water and you wet your paper. It might be a little hard for you to see, but I wet this part of my paper. Now with watercolor paint, you need to wake up the paint. It's not ready to be used now. So what I do is I take my paintbrush and I'm kind of going into the water, getting a little bit of water, and then putting it into that palette. I give it a little stir, and what happens is it creates a little puddle of color. It should never feel thick or sticky or gooey. The texture should be the same as water. That's why it's called watercolor. For wet on wet, I wet my paper and then I go in to a color. And then I put drops of that color onto the water. What that does is the paint moves and blends and bleeds around. It can be fun to do it with multiple colors. If you're doing this though, you need to have a solid understanding of the color wheel and rainbow order. The colors that will look good with wet on wet next to one another are next door neighbors. So green and blue are next to each other on the color wheel, so they look really nice together in a technique like wet on wet. All right, the next technique is to add salt. I'm dipping into a color of my choice, green, and I'm putting it onto the paper. Then I'm adding just a sprinkle of salt while it's still wet. I'm not dumping. That doesn't even work. It has to be just a sprinkle. What happens is the salt absorbs some of the color as it dries. So now I don't touch it, I leave it alone, and I'll show you how it looks when it's dry. Last technique I want you to explore is blotting. I'm taking a little bit of paint, and then I'm grabbing a paper towel, and I'm dabbing on. You can see that as I do, a texture is created. Now we're going to let this dry for next week. You're going to decide what techniques you would like to use in your painting, but you can't tell yet because the paint isn't dry. If you have time now, you can start outlining yourself. I have 3 different varieties of marker, a very thick one. I don't think you'll want that for this step. I have a medium marker, which will probably be great for almost everything here. So I'm just tracing over my pencil lines. Now, in the eye, it might be helpful to have this very fine tip marker for these types of lines. They're very small. On the back of this paper, I'll show you quickly. If you use a marker this size, what happens is those same types of lines start to bleed together, so you can get a lot more detail with this type of marker. So it might be helpful for things around the eye, like the eyelashes. You might even want to use it for the whole eye. I'm not sure. I can get pretty good control with the regular Sharpie, but if you have a little bit of trouble with that, no big deal. Grab this smaller marker. Now I am going to trace around all of my pencil lines like that. I'll time lapse you. All right, I decided to add half of my glasses since that's something that I think kind of shows you who I am. If you wear glasses, you can have that option, but obviously you don't have to do that. Now, the next step is totally optional. You're gonna decide how you want to fill your hair. Some people like to fill their hair with the color black. I think I wanna actually fill mine with color, so I'll show you on the back what I mean here. So if that is the head of another person, some people like to color all of their hair in black to create contrast. Contrast is when 2 objects or 2 items that are not alike are near one another. So something that is totally black can be next to watercolor, and that creates contrast. Some people like to do this, especially people who actually have darker hair, because I think it makes it look more like them. So you get the choice. If you want to fill your hair in with the marker, or you can leave your hair empty and fill it in with the paint. Up to you. All right, now I can look at my techniques and see what I liked best. I really like how this wet on wet kind of fades from green to blue. And you can see the salt leaves little, almost like polka dots or crystals. The texture I also liked. It is okay to combine techniques. The trick is, if you're going to do that, salt must be last. So, I'm gonna start working on mine, and I'm gonna start with wet on wet. We discussed how you need to use next door neighbor colors when you are doing painting with the wet on wet in particular, because you know your colors are going to blend when you do wet on wet. So I'm gonna start here by adding water, and I'm gonna show you how to fade from color to color in case you want to use more than 2 colors in yours. Okay, so I'll start with the color red. I'm going into my watercolor and stirring around. I want to make sure that I'm creating a puddle. It should be literally the texture of water. If this goes on thickly and you can't see any paper through, then you're not using it correctly. You need to add just the tiniest bit of paint to quite a lot of water. It should be translucent. Translucent means a little bit see-through. I'm gonna go back in and add some dots there that are a little darker red. Okay, when I find red on the color wheel, I can make a choice. Do I wanna fade into orange or purple? I think I'm gonna go with purple and kind of do like a reverse rainbow situation, but this would work really well if you're wanting to do something in rainbow order. So I'm gonna use this like magenta purplish color here, And I can put them right up next to each other, or I can leave a little space and just kind of allow them to blend and bleed with one another. I can also add a little bit of this color, since it is a next door neighbor color, and kind of add some polka dots in that last shape I made to kind of create some variation in the color. It almost makes a pattern. All right, I just did that purple color, so I can choose either to go back to red or go to blue. I'm gonna go to blue. So I'm gonna add a little bit of water here. I wanna do my eye separately. So as I'm doing this, I'm going around my eye. I'm gonna treat my eye like a totally different situation that I'm going to paint separately and more realistically. So around the eye. And I'm adding the color blue. Since they're next door neighbors on the color wheel, it's okay if I wanna go back in here and add a few dots inside of it. All right, from the color blue, I have a choice, purple or green. I'm going with green, painting around and waking up my green. Now, if I wanted to do blotting as I'm working, that would be totally fine. You do want to make sure you have a fairly clean paper towel. I'm also not blotting the white areas. I want to keep the background white. So if you are doing blotting, you really need to be careful of where you're doing. Okay, so from green, I'm moving into yellow, just kind of following in a circle, and oops, I forgot to wet my paper. Whoo, caught myself. All right, into yellow. And by the end of this, I'm gonna go to orange, and orange is next to red, which will mean I will have created a full rainbow, just kind of out of order. I started with red and then went to purple. So I just followed in a circle around the color wheel. Now I'm gonna go back into my eye, and I think on the area of my eye, I wanna use the salt technique. I could totally use salt here if I wanted to. Right now would be a great time to add it, but I don't think I want to. I am gonna take a little bit of red, since red is the next door neighbor of orange, and add some little dots right into the orange. All right, for the eye, I'm gonna take some blue. I wanna leave the iris of my eye white. If you don't want to, that's okay, your choice. I actually have blue eyes, so I use the color blue, and I'm adding salt on top. Now this is ready to dry. Next week, I'm gonna fill the background with words. Now that my paint's ready, I'm ready to fill the background, and I'm gonna fill the background with descriptive words, adjectives that tell about me. We're gonna go through some different ways of making making fonts, but we'll do that as a group. I'm just gonna show you how to do it on your paper. So you're gonna start with a variety of markers, small, medium, and large, and see what different types of lines you can get. And you're looking through these to find words that describe you. So I'm gonna put the word creative. I think I'm a pretty creative person. As I'm doing that, I'm trying to think of ways to write the word creative that are creative, that kind of match. So I'm adding like a swirly line to the end of my C. I'm making the letter R, putting a little spiral on it. Just ways to make it united so it feels whole. And you can do different fonts for different words. Maybe I'll make a cloud around this to kind of highlight it. You can see that my marker is going a little bit gray. If that happens to you, switch your marker. It's better to get a good marker to get a nice bold line. Now I'm gonna rotate my paper and find other words that describe me. I think I'm curious, but I don't think I am as curious as I am creative. So I'm gonna write that one a little bit smaller. Maybe I'll add a couple lines around it because I do wanna make every word kind of interesting or unique. Now I'm going to move on to imaginative. Okay, cursive is another way to do. You have your cursive letters, and you don't need to connect them all. You can just write each letter if you want in a cursive font. Now, as I'm running out of space, I'm just rotating my paper. Imaginative, and I'm gonna put a free-flowing line under it because I think being imaginative kind of is represented by that. Maybe I'll even sketch out like a little light bulb, like I have a lot of ideas. Just thinking of ways I can visually represent those words as well. And I wanna also pay attention to size, like I have a little bit of size left there. I'm gonna add the word bold, and I'm gonna do it with a little bit of a thicker line by tracing back over. I could have also used that big marker. That would be a great strategy for that. I chose a small word because I have a small space. If you're going to be doing bubble letters, things like we learned in class where you write the word and then trace around, you'll want to start in pencil first. So I'm doing the word loyal and then I'm tracing around. If I did that straight away with the marker, then I would have the line inside my bubble letter as well, and I didn't want that. And then when I'm done, just taking my pencil and erasing. I'm gonna put two hearts next to each other, maybe make it look like they're kind of holding hands. Loyal means that you're kind and responsive to your friends and family, and that's something that I'm kind of proud that I am. So I'm putting like two hearts together like they're holding hands, because that to me represents loyalty. And I'm gonna keep working like that until my page is full. I wanted to come back because I ran into a problem, and it's one you might run into. My word patient is running into my word loyal. So I have a couple choices. I can make like a small T and squeeze it on, or I can make it look like it overlaps or goes behind. So I'm making it look like my letter T is going behind my loyal L, so that way it still makes sense. So if you have that problem, those are a couple strategies. I also wanted to show you the big marker. I had forgotten to do that. So I'm gonna rotate my paper. For the big marker, it's really good for larger letters, especially ones that you want to be dark and bold. Mine isn't working very well, so I'm gonna give another one a try here. There we go, that's better. I'm gonna do the word smart because I think I am a smart person, and I think I'm pretty smart. So you can see how the quality of line I'm getting with this marker is a lot thicker and darker. So this is great for the words that you think you are a lot. Now that I'm getting to the end, I might want this smaller marker. I can fill in little areas around really well with this small marker. So you can see this is the large marker, this is the small, and this is the medium. And you can see what different types of lines I get. Okay, I'm gonna keep working now, and I'll time lapse you and show you when I'm done. Now you can see mine's about done, and it tells a lot about me as a human and also as an artist. So every word or letters that I added, I did something extra, like kind of like a zigzag bubble around it, or I did a little sketch. So for example, for curious, I made a little magnifying glass, like I'm investigating. For peaceful, I made a peace sign. So every word has some sort of little fun element to it, and all of these words are about me. It also shows that I'm really good at using my watercolor techniques. In fact, let's do a little reveal moment here. I just scraped the salt away, and you can see up close, it left little tiny specks around my eye that make it look like it's glimmering a little bit. Awesome. I cannot wait to see how yours turn out. Very cool, guys.